Hello, my name is Crystal Petrie, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petrie Podcast, Season 3. What happens when a white racist goes to jail? George Sedberry's case. Prison became an unlikely place where the walls of hate broke down and his heart opened to the truth. Today, you'll hear how vulnerability, honesty, and learning a little known history of Black Americans transformed his life, and while he now uses his voice to challenge white superiority and advocate for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. So, welcome to the podcast, George. As some
Thank you for
people
having
might
me.
know you, White George, but I'm just going to refer to you as George on this podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes. So, my first question for you, George, where in the world are you?
At the moment, I'm in Danbury, Connecticut, but I'm headed to DC for Congressional Black Caucus next week.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm glad we were able to catch you in between that. So, let's hop into this conversation, George. I want to talk about your personal story and your transformation. And my podcast is on YouTube Podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts. So, the people that are listening on Apple Podcasts, I want you to know, because of course you can't see George, that he is a Caucasian male, which will be the foundation of what this podcast is about and the conversation. So take us back. What led you to prison in the first place?
I back in 2001, I had surgery. I have a gigantic scar on my arm you can't really see. I'd got an
Okay.
infection in my middle finger, and that infection lodged in my arm and created something called cellulitis. Okay, it's a very common bacterial infection. It can be lethal, etc. So I'd gone to the doctor and they just kept giving me shots and shots. And finally, the pain was so intense and my arm was bigger than my bicep now. I went to the
Wow.
hospital, had to have emergency surgery. An orthopedic surgeon had to come in, almost lost my arm. And they gave me 600 hydrocodones. And I took
What?
those pain pills religiously every 1 to 2, every 4 to 6 hours until they were gone, not knowing that that was leading to an addiction and a 10-year downward spiral. In the last year of my addiction, I had the bright idea that I would start robbing houses for sale of jewelry. And I became
Mhm.
a very prolific jewelry thief, and I got addicted to the rush of that also. You see, I have an addictive personality, right? Because there's, and now I understand why I did, but at the time I didn't realize it. And I was caught and I was sentenced to 13 years in prison. I did just right around 3 years total.
Okay, so once you get to prison, how did your worldview about race and identity look once you got to prison and before you got to prison?
I went twice. I went back on a parole violation, so I've been 2 times total.
Okay.
I was pretty racist when I went into prison the first time. I came out more racist probably than I've ever been in 2014. When I went back in 2015, I carried that inside, but my experience was much different this time, right? And not knowing all the experiences the first time were going to play a huge part of my life later on.
Mhm.
But it was the second time I spent a lot of time with some black lifers and some other guys that I just befriended and conversations. I can't, I didn't, I wasn't intentionally more open. It's just where I was and the people I was around. I think, like I said, always God has a reason for everything. These are men I was supposed to interact with. And um, when I got out the second time, I thought the world had changed, and I realized that it hadn't. I had changed, and then I struggled with to figure out how I was changing because it's not like a light bulb went off in my head, and I go, "Damn, I was wrong. I got to fix this."
Mhm.
So yeah, it just I jumped from perception to perspective, and that was jarring for my psychological well being, and I had to really figure that out.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
Mhm.
Jumping
I
from
saw, yeah.
perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw the world through my blue eyes, right? George's blue eyes. The way I was raised, my ideology, and I was raised with a very racist mindset, right? It was passed down. I was around, not all, but a lot of my friends were. And so I lived in an echo chamber and I didn't even know there was a way to think differently, right? I had no idea because everybody around me kind of thought the same. So, having said that, I could only see the world through my perception, my lived experiences. And in prison, I got to live among men who were so vastly different than me. Their backgrounds, their experiences grew up 20 minutes from me, right? But it might have well have been another planet. But those stories they shared with me, the one on one conversations locked in a cell, I carried them. Like I can't unload those stories. And the weight of some of those stories started to affect me. So when I got out, I began to look at the world through their eyes. I began to match up what I was seeing with hearing the experiences of other people who didn't look like me. And I began to connect dots that I had never seen before. And I felt like I went from my perception through my blue eyes to my perspective, where I step back and I have a much bigger myopic view of the world and society instead of street level.
Can you speak, George? We hear it all the time. It's a very popular colloquialism that you're not born racist, you are
You're not.
taught that. Can you speak
Absolutely.
to that? Because that seems like your upbringing.
Yeah, and it's back in the day, I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. We never used the word racism. It wasn't in our lexicon. We used the word prejudice. Now, even
Okay.
among people who were prejudiced, we have degrees of it. We would talk about other people and say, oh, they're really prejudiced, or, well, she's kind of prejudiced. Like we had
Mhm.
levels and codes. And today it has like I said, racism sounds much harsher to us, but you're not born learning how to hate unless you're born a psychopath, right?
Okay.
Psychopaths
Yes.
are born, sociopaths
Yes.
are made. You don't know how to hate, right? You don't know who to hate. You have to be taught. And again, understand, coming from my community, we don't see racism as hate at all. We literally see it as bias and stereotype. We don't hate you, just stay over there. We don't wish ill will on you, just don't interact with us. Or I wish you
Right.
would stop causing all the problems in America because we're perfect and we don't want to look in the mirror and be accountable. It's I'll boil racism before you even ask me. I'll boil racism down to its most basic component. It's not hate. That's a manifestation of racism. Racism is an inability to cope. It's a lack of accountability. The example I'll use is say I had mowed my yard in 3 months and I got four
Mhm.
cars on cinder blocks in the yard, but you, Crystal, and your family moved down the street, right at the very end of the cul-de-sac. Oh, there goes my value. My property value is going down. We got a black family. It's not because I'm white trash, right? I don't want to look in the mirror and admit I'm white trash and I'm not willing to take care of my property. It's so much easier to blame you, somebody I've never met or talked to, for my problems. And I get to skate through life. Do you know how hard that is for people to give up?
You know what? I have never encountered that, but just hearing it and thinking about it, I can imagine that that is very hard. That anytime something goes wrong in your life, you don't have to take accountability for it. You could just blame someone else for it.
It's not always about there are people who hate other people because of the way they look. Let's be clear about
Yes.
that. But
Yes.
the big swath in the middle, you just get to be the scapegoat for everything.
Hmm.
And I'm not justifying, I'm not rationalizing. I'm trying to give a perspective of racism from somebody who spent most of his life in that culture and my perspective now looking back on it. Like, when you say there's a really intelligent, super smart racist, I disagree because I feel like when I dropped my racism and I worked my way through it, I felt like my brain sped up. I think my clarity was up. It freed a lot of brain power I was using for negativity. If I know that sounds trite, but I haven't met a really brilliant racist. I've seen some slick talking ones. I've seen some
Yeah.
ones that know how to manipulate. And that's on any political aisle. I'm not picking on anybody there. I see it a lot, but I know people who act and talk it. And I just don't think you can truly be emotionally intelligent, psychologically intelligent, all combined with racism. I just don't.
Can you tell us one of the stories while you were in prison that profoundly changed the way you start thinking and looking at the world? And also, if you can give us that man's name.
This is funny. I can remember things by name, every neighbor in my neighborhood, their phone number, but I cannot remember Larry's last name.
Okay.
Larry was my first cellmate when I got to prison. Larry's a black guy from Little Rock. His last name begins with a W, and as much as I can remember every detail, it's like God has blocked that last name for a reason. I
Okay.
have no recollection of it. And Larry was a cellmate, and we were on lockdown, and he's like, "Bro, can we talk?" Are you a racist, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, can I ask you some questions about that? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. So we had conversations. He asked me direct questions and I gave him direct answers. But I got to ask him questions about what it's like to be a black man in America. Now
Oh.
that's a conversation I've never had. I was 40 years old. And he taught me about racism from a perspective that I'd never seen. And I'll never forget this. I got goosebumps. He goes, your grandmother doesn't hate me. I'm like, no, Larry, she'd love you, man. You're a great dude. You know, I'd take you to dinner in a heartbeat. Right. And she goes, yeah, of course she would, bro. He goes, I'm a nice, decent guy. He goes, but do you know why she doesn't like me? I'm like, why is that? He goes, because she doesn't know me. And what you don't know, you don't understand. And what you don't understand, you fear. He goes, your grandma has a lot of has black people she likes. I'm like, yeah, my grandma has, several. He goes, but that thing called Black America out there is what she hates. It's enigma. He goes, because she's never taken the time to understand it. And to know, I've learned this from experience. To know Black America is to love Black America. Like nobody can tell me otherwise. Immersion has been one of the best things I ever did, but because we keep so segregated, like subconsciously segregated, that hurts us. Best thing I ever did was go out and learn and meet people where they are as who they are. But it took a guy in prison. I asked about domestic violence. That's what he was in there for. I've never put my hands on a woman in my life, right? So I'm kind of judgmental sometimes about people who do. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of hard on him about it. He goes, bro, you're right. I'm in the wrong and I'm in here because I was wrong. But why, Larry? He goes, I saw my grandpa put his hands on my grandma. I saw my uncles put my hands on their aunties. I saw their boyfriends put their hands on her. I saw my dad put his hands on my mom, and I saw her boyfriends put her hands on my mom. He goes, I knew it was wrong. He goes, and the first time I did it, I knew I was wrong. And it gave me empathy. Like I went into prison a bit of a sociopath, and I came out with this empathy that is painful to me. I can't explain it, but those conversations about rap culture, how people view it, traffic. He goes, I know in traffic, I don't have to slow down. You're going to. I know you got insurance, so I don't have to.
Larry.
I was like, Larry, he broke things down for me in a
Yes.
way no one ever had. So yeah, I had a lot of those moments, but Larry is he'll never understand how those conversations changed my life.
For you, and I am never a proponent of going to prison or anything good happening in prison. I don't feel like the institution is set up that way. But for you, going to prison completely changed your life in such a great and profound way because you are actually able to sit down and talk to a Black man, learn his life, and listen. how what advice or how can Americans, or maybe even just one person that's listening to your voice right now, have that same opportunity, a white person, an Asian person, a Hispanic person, to sit down and learn from and listen to a Black person without having to go to prison?
It's somewhere along the way I became comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you sit down and you're going to have talk to people of different backgrounds that we're divided on, you're going to hear some very uncomfortable things, and you've got to be able to absorb those without taking them personally. Right? You got to understand that person is projecting their pain and feelings onto you in a conversation. It has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I understand sometimes I physically am the manifestation of who and what they're talking about. Right? And I've seen people become more and more passionate because of my face, but I will sit there and take it because I know they're not coming from a place of ill will or being mean, right? I understand it's passion and pain coming out. And I personally will absorb it all because I'm validating what they're saying, right? I'm recognizing. So if people could just learn to be uncomfortable or being comfortable being uncomfortable, put yourself in a couple of these conversations. They're not nearly as bad as you think. And I promise you're going to walk away going, damn. But that's so hard for people because they don't want to be vulnerable and they don't want their ego and pride come into play, right? It's not about hate a lot of times. It's about insecurity.
What was the hardest truth you had to unpack about yourself once you finished listening and learning to Larry, and then coming back to the world that you knew as prejudiced or racist, and we're okay with black people, but you stay over there, don't interact with us?
The, be- Realizing, accepting that I had been a fake Christian my whole life, because you cannot be racist and serve God. You can't. It goes against everything he teaches us. It goes against everything. How love your neighbor, how you treat the least of these is how you would treat me. Love God first and love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, some of the simplest commandments, the most basic, and racism violates every one of those. And the churches I grew up in, and I went to a great church. I love the church I grew up in, my church family, fantastic people. But we never talked about how racism and our faith intersects. My morality and my faith in God and my racism never intersected until prison. And it broke me down when I realized it. And then I realized in the Bible where God says, how you treat the least of these. I used to think it meant orphans and widows, right? I never gave thought to it. But I came to realize, I guess, praying and all that, to me, the least means who society has treated the least. And in my lifetime, it's Black America. And so I don't know. I feel in some way when I stand before God on Judgment Day, what I did, I was born into a world where racism was accepted, and it was up to me to fix my character. It's not up to the world to fix it for me. And I think I'll stand before God someday and have to answer for that.
Yes. What do you think has been your greatest transformation since your life opened up, since you started looking at the world in a different manner?
Man, I don't, that's hard to say. I was a real piece of crap person. I was a thief. I was an addict, been a sociopath. I didn't always care if somebody got hurt. I was raised right. I was taught right from wrong. My criminal behavior was not from necessarily that I wasn't raised with values, not at all. But there was a lot of childhood trauma that was unresolved.
Mm-hmm.
And so, having said all that, I mean, I don't. My dad had diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. I was in the hospital with bacterial meningitis 11 months later, and the day before I got to the hospital, our house burned down. So I
Wow.
had to learn to walk again. Like it was a really rough time in life. So I look for all those things, my addiction, and now I think I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest transformation is empathy. It's not something I've ever felt. I couldn't conjure it up. And now I can't stop it.
You are being extremely vulnerable on this podcast, George, and I appreciate it. Do you think the lack of vulnerability or people wanting to feel that I'm racist, feel that I'm a Christian, but I'm racist, or I have stereotypes that I believe in my heart and that I think in my mind, is the reason why so many books are being banned? Is the reason why there is an attack on the African American Smithsonian Museum? It's a reason why, and this just happened. We're recording this on September the 18th, and it happened, I want to say, about 2 or 3 days ago, where President Trump had the famous portrait of the Black man with the whips and the bruises and everything on his back taken and removed. And as Black Americans, we feel the reason that these things are happening is because white America does not want their children to feel bad about slavery, or white America themselves don't want to feel bad about slavery. What do you say to that?
Um, this is probably going to be an unpopular answer, but this is simply my opinion and observation.
Yes.
I don't think so. It has so much to do with slavery and telling the truth. To be honest, I don't think they care. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and the best way I can verbalize it is to say, with what all's going on right now, is kind of white America's George Floyd moment.
Explain that. I've never heard that
There is,
before.
there was, my evolution happened, in the early 2020s. That's when things really started, because I supported President Trump in 16 and 20. I was never MAGA, never owned a hat, but I was definitely leaned a lot more conservative. It's ironic, the more I got into my faith and more of the way that I focus on how I live my life, I went straight to the middle. You know what I mean? I started to step away, but that was my thing. Um, at that time, people were getting canceled for saying the wrong thing. And I'm not going to make this left or right, but I'm looking at a lot of the
Right.
craziness that went on. And there was a lot of craziness, right?
Yes.
And as a white, straight male, I felt disenfranchised. Okay. So at the late teens, 20 teens, I
Hmm.
felt disenfranchised. Like I was being attacked. Like the least popular person to be in this country was a straight white man. What did I do? I felt that at the time. Right now, I understand why I felt it and how I was manipulated and propagandized. But it was real. And there's a lot of people who still hold that feeling. Now, you can debate what all went on and who was involved, but there was a gigantic movement, right? And a lot of white America perceived they were being attacked because of their whiteness for something they had nothing to do with in their minds, right? And so now you're watching cancel culture come back in the reverse. And so, from my perspective, they're taking a playbook that they experienced and they're shoving it down the other side's throat. And so, it's happening disproportionately fast. And I think this will come to a head and be America will figure out our way past it very disproportionately fast too. Because the faster these things speed up, the faster they explode and they're over. Rather than a decade of building. So you know, and I'm going to be very, very clear in my words here. Nobody, from Martin Luther King to Charlie Kirk, deserves to be murdered or to lose their life. Sorry, I don't want this to be flagged. They deserve to lose their life in front of their family and loved ones and for speaking their mind, whether I agree or not. They don't deserve it. My faith says otherwise. Um, I think that that's a dangerous precedence being set. And you had the 5 police officers shot yesterday. Three didn't survive. You have the 2 young men found hanging on a rope in Mississippi. The 2 school kids shot in Colorado. The woman that was stabbed in the neck. I can go on and on. We had the police. I think it was in Minnesota or somewhere that held a black man down for over 5 minutes and he couldn't breathe and he passed away. And they're Canton, Ohio. They're being charged. Like I don't know. This experiment's not working.
It's
And
definitely not working.
but I think we're seeing a lot of white people had Black Lives Matter fatigue. And I did too until I began to understand what Black Lives Matter meant. And then it changed my whole perspective. And you can ask me about that. But I think there's fatigue. And I think in a way because they are disenfranchised and they have been preyed upon, this is their moment of glory. I mean,
Okay, so let's talk about what you feel and what you think Black Lives Matter means, because there has been an absolute attack on the letters BLM, the organization, the people, the women, the Black women that started that movement. It has been an attack on that since they uttered the words on TV, Black Lives Matter as well.
there's a deeper psychology here to kind of go into this. You're right that the phrase Black Lives Matter is burned. The phrase reparations is burned. The
Yes.
word DEI is burned. These are all just marketing. That's all this is
Yes.
marketing. You have to have new language, okay? Just accept that the phrase is going to be called something else. It used to be called affirmative action, which nobody wants to talk about Vietnam veterans coming back in the 70s who were given government jobs through affirmative action, white men. And I don't have a problem with it, right? They fought for us.
Hmm.
We're helping give them careers. Like I'm for that. But let's call it what it is. But
Yes.
we as a community never had a problem with it as long as we're benefiting too. But if we see somebody else getting something that we don't even need or we didn't even know existed, we're upset that they're getting it and we're not. That's a generalization, but keep that in mind. So I was all lives matter, blue lives matter. Why do only black lives matter? I thought that way so strongly. And I had a coworker who sat me down one day, right? A white guy. He goes, let's pretend for a second you adopted 4 daughters, right? He goes, one, it's black, Hispanic, white, and Asian. He goes, do you love your daughters? Like, well, yeah, of course, if I adopted them. He goes, what if your little black daughter comes up to you and says, Daddy, do you love me? He goes, how do you answer her? I go, like, of course I love you. He goes, wait, wait, wait. You don't tell her I love all my daughters, honey. And I kind of stopped. He goes, you tell her you love her? Or do you have to put her in a big group? And I was kind of like, well, that doesn't make sense. He goes, Black America's, they're crying out, is what they're doing. That's what this is. He goes, and they just need to be heard. That's all it is. Just validate and recognize their reality. He goes, of course all lives matter. But this is just to say, hey, acknowledge this is not right. That's all it is. And I was like, oh. But then people don't realize there's three different Black Lives Matters. Did you know that?
Hold on, give me a second. I did not.
Okay, there is the original organization.
Yes.
Okay. Then there's the charity, Black Lives Matter, the philanthropy side that managed the money. And then there's
Yes.
Black Lives Matter movement, which is chapters all over the country, which has no central control to it.
Okay,
So
so I
these
knew
are,
about those, but I didn't. I associated them all as just one.
nope, all three. The original Black Lives Matter organization, from my understanding, sued the charity, lost. So there was a bunch of stuff going on. It's all public. I interviewed Cicely Gay, the chairwoman of Black Lives Matter. I asked her where'd the money go. She broke it down. They've submitted all the tax returns to the IRS. They've been approved and accepted and certified.
Right.
So she explained how they spent it. But at the same time, I never thought about it. They started this movement and tens of millions of dollars are coming in. They had no structure. They had no accountants. They didn't know what any
Right.
of us thrown into that situation would make a million mistakes.
Exactly. And it
And they
was
were
really
magnified.
seemingly overnight that all of the money and the support, the t-shirts, that everything happened, they were not prepared at all.
And so, and I believe they were attacked way more fiercely than somebody who looked like me. And people can get upset for that, but I'm sorry. I see how Fawn Weaver getting sued for Uncle Nearest. That it's I don't know. I see spectacles made more of black women in cases like this being lawsuits and challenged, like Black Lives with Patrice Cullors, for instance. And by the way, she messaged me after I did that interview, which I thought was cool because I've never met her, but I told in the interview to Cicely, I was like, we're not going to discuss Patrice Cullors because she's not here to defend herself, and that's not fair to her.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And she said, thank you for that. So again, but a lot of that movement had a lot of negativity to it also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the political other side is so good at exploiting that negativity. And
Yes.
that is forever etched into minds of the opponents of BLM. Because when I hear somebody, ask a liberal, what's a woman? I want to go, well, how do you define a Christian?
That's a great question.
Because I don't think you and I define them the same way.
Yeah.
So, it's again, 54% of Americans read it at sixth grade or below. I think that statement speaks for itself.
Yes. Yes. Let's move on to race and history and education, which I am a profound lover and reader of history and education and race. How I came to know you, George, was initially your handle, which is White George. It really like stuck out to me. And then when I would hear just like your shorts and your clips giving little known Black history facts, which a lot of them I knew, but I'm gonna be honest, even as a Black woman, some of them I did not know. So that it caught me off guard, but it also kept me coming back to your content. Why do you think so much Black history in America is left untaught and unsaid and even erased at this point?
To be with as much as long as I've been doing this,
Mhm.
I feel like the thing where it's just undiscovered. Like there's no one's compelled to go learn these things. Like I
True.
feel like God put me on a path, so I have this passion and just curiosity and thirst for knowledge, right? So it's different for me. But can you create a reason white schools would have dug into it? They would have been compelled to. I'm not defending them. Most of the students were white. You teach to white students, white teachers. You tend to be interested in what your cultures. I'm not trying to cast shame on them, but there's nothing compels them to. And I think history unites us; it doesn't divide us. And I'm gonna take the issue of slavery.
Mhm.
That was a whole, and I'm not talking. People always want to expand American slavery to worldwide slavery. It's always moving the goalposts, right? It's called a
Mott
Mott and Bailey fallacy. It's a psychological thing people use. Um, You see it all the time. So they want to expand the boundaries because they don't want to talk about what it's hand. It was horrible,
Yes.
horrific what happened to human beings by Americans' hands. Okay, we can absolutely, we know it, but if white America, I feel like we would validate it and acknowledge it, and would acknowledge that there is generational trauma from it. There's a lot of things, lingering effects, even though it ended 160 years ago, even though we
Hmm.
just changed it to inmate slavery. I think if we could just acknowledge that, show respect that there is pain that exists, that we could start to move forward. But as long as we want to just sit and deny it, or not at least see it and try to understand it through the perspective of Black America, we're always going to be at odds over it. And people feel like, why do I got to see it through their eyes? Why can't they see it through my? I don't know, because we held the key and they were in chains. I don't know.
Right.
I just feel like it would go a long ways if we would swallow our pride and ego about it. Nobody has to apologize. You don't have anything to apologize for, and you would agree with that. Why would somebody apologize to you?
True.
But if they would sit down and just listen,
And acknowledge. Yes.
if you share a story and they're there and they reach over and grab your hand and just look at you, and just that moment of going, I feel everything you're telling me.
Mhm.
Just that you're both touched by that moment, right?
Right.
Simple moments like that change lives. They change perspectives. They open hearts and minds. That's why I say be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
And it's really also the change behavior. You acknowledge what slavery was, what it did. You acknowledge Jim Crow. You acknowledge the redlining. And if these phrases I'm saying you're not familiar with, please Google and look them up. But you acknowledge those things and then change the behavior associated with them. The apology, just like you said, we want the change behavior. And I'm not going to preach because we are, doing a podcast, but that's what it really comes down to. What are some of the most powerful, if you can narrow them down, George, what are some of the most powerful stories of Black American contributions that changed your outlook?
My outlook changed from experiences with people as opposed to stories.
Hmm.
Um, the stories themselves have had a much bigger impact on me than people realize. Let's see if I can explain this. I'll give it to you both ways. I've always
Okay.
been a storyteller. Part of the way is just to survive my childhood. And I've always loved telling just esoteric stories or unique things, right? When I started jumping into Black history, I felt like everything I'd ever worked for, all the skills I developed were meant for this subject. I can't explain it. I just have this insatiable desire for knowledge, how I can link it. And it began to transform me, right? I knew about George Washington Carver in elementary school.
Hmm.
I knew as much as the encyclopedia would tell me about him, right? They didn't tell me he'd been castrated. They didn't tell me the horrors that boy went through, how he lost his family. They didn't say that. But because his name was G.W. Carver, and that's what I went by as a boy as GW, I had a connection to him because nobody has the name GW. Nobody. And they
Hmm.
called him G.W. Carver. And I was like, so I've always had this fascination. My grandmother told me the story of the Little Rock Nine, Central High School students.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't realize that my dad was in school at Central High School there. My uncle was a senior in that class. My
No.
grandmother, my grandmother led the parents, Central High School parents against integration. There is on the internet, you can Google, there's FBI interviews with her where she said she would have snatched the hair off Elizabeth Heckford's head if she could. My grandmother. My grandmother's brother was Governor Faubus's chief of staff, the man who called the National Guard out to prevent the non-students against Eisenhower, who called the 101st Airborne to escort him in. My
Yes.
great uncle, Claude, who, by the way, it's crazy to think that because I only knew him, later in life, and I knew that he had a daughter born with severe physical disabilities, and he hired a Black woman, a full-time nanny. And Kelly wasn't supposed to live more than a couple of years, and I think she lived till she was 16. And this woman was devoted to Kelly's care, the best money could buy. And he
Hmm.
made sure after Kelly was gone, he took care of that woman and her kids. Just, you know what I mean? So I see this one-on-one action, right? So it's hard for me
Right.
to. But my grandmother, when she spoke later in life of the non-students, she spoke with reverence, respect, despite being so against it in the 1950s. By the 1990s and 2000s, yeah, it was a different story she told.
Hmm.
She told me about John H. Johnson. Do you know who that is? Born
Wasn't
in
he an
Arkansas.
athlete?
No, born in Arkansas City, Arkansas in 1919, the same part of the state. My grandma was born in 1920. She
Hmm.
remembers him as a boy coming to the town, the little library, because he would read everything in the library he could. Mom moved him to Chicago to DuSable High School in ninth grade, and his best friend in high school was a guy named Red Fox. He went on to work at Supreme Life Insurance at 18. He asked the CEO, "Can I have the mailing list of all our customers?" He and his mom borrowed $500, started a newspaper called the Negro Digest, and that turned into Jet and Ebony magazine. And he became the first Black American on the Forbes 400 rich list of richest Americans. And my grandmother remembers him as a child and would tell me that story. And so I went, and that's the first Black American history story I told on the internet.
Wow. Oh my, and you haven't stopped since. What year was that? What year was that?
2023,
20. Okay.
two
So
and a
it,
half years ago.
yes, yes.
I've only been
Okay,
on Instagram 25 months, 26 months. That's it.
that's it. I feel like you are everywhere. I see you on all the social medias. I see you on Instagram. I see you especially on Facebook, on YouTube. I see you everywhere.
I don't even put it on YouTube.
Really?
I guess other people's podcasts, I never see myself. I have 600 followers on YouTube. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
Can you explain? I feel like it was once called white superiority syndrome, but really it's morphed into white privilege at this point. Can you explain that term and why do you think people don't think it exists or think it's real?
Um. Okay. This is going to be. I thought a lot about this. I would have never considered myself a white supremacist by the same definition you do. White people do not think of themselves. If you're racist, we're not white supremacists. There's a whole scale of racism to us. Starting with, I would say, I'll start at the worst, the complete white supremacists, the area, the just white is right, nothing else matters. And
Hmm.
under that, you've got the white pride people, which aren't completely what we consider white supremacists, the KKK, Nazi, blah blah blah. So you got these white pride people. Then you got to the racist people, right? And then we go down to that little bit racist, you know what I mean? They've still just got it under there. And then we go to the middle, which are the apathetic people. I don't see color and I don't care. It doesn't affect me. I like you for who you are, right? That's the biggest swath. And then we come over here to allies. And then we go to advocate, which is where I kind of think I am. And then
Hmm.
beyond that, one beyond me is activist. So there's this huge sliding scale of it, right? And depending on where you fall, your perception is different.
Hmm.
We think racism is monolithic. It's not. Racism is also depends big time on peer pressure to exist. Group of
Okay.
white guys together, and somebody's dropping the N word. Everybody's got to do it. So now you have mutually assured destruction in that conversation. Nobody can get out of it. And
Hmm.
yes, I have had peer pressure applied to me because I wouldn't say something. Or are you an N lover? Because I wouldn't say something. I've had that conversation. I've been in those conversations countless times. So, having said that, let's go to our version of what white supremacy is. Right now, I understand it better, or white privilege. By the fact, I am happy that I am born white in this country. And no disrespect, I'm glad I'm born white and not any other color. Lets me know I have a degree of privilege. Just by that simple fact. Ask somebody, do you wish you'd have been born black? Oh, hell no. Then you got privilege, my friend. Now, people have a misunderstanding of what privilege is, right? We think of it one way because what we're taught a definition. We have to expand our minds to understand what privilege means. I can do things and be in rooms you can't. You can be in that room, but you're probably not going to be heard in that room. And
Or
you know
feel
what I'm talking
comfortable
about.
in that room.
Yeah, or accepted, right? And
Hmm.
here's the other, I've walked into many, many big rooms and I'm the only white face in that room. And I'll feel a little bit of weird energy, but for the most part, people are glad I'm there, whether they know me or not. But you go to an all white room and let one black person walk in, the whole energy changes. I'm not saying it's racist at all, but everybody just became aware. Even if do you know what I mean? It's just a weird
Yes,
psychological
I do.
difference. That's all it is. So, having said that, I believe here's why I think privilege exists in a scale. I know this is a long answer. World hunger, homelessness, and racism are always going to exist. Racism
Yes.
was called something else before it. It was classism, it's feudal, it's always something, right? Where you're from or your socioeconomic class Now it's skin color. This thing has existed throughout humanity, right? It's human nature for one. So I think God puts us on earth in different places in life. And what we do in those places is what matters. If I'm born up here with blue eyes, right? White in America, I understand where I am in the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
I am near the very top, am I not?
Yes.
And because
Especially
of
as a
that,
male. Yes.
I'm highly aware that so I can move in ways a lot of people cannot. So having said that, I understand that that is a privilege. And I wish more people would, but they all want to think everything's equal, and it's not. Listen, I was discriminated against in prison for being white. I didn't like it either. That also opened my eyes to being the minority and not liking it. Imagine that. It's funny how when it lands on your doorstep, it changes how you feel about things.
Yes.
So I feel like we're born into places in life. Some are born on the being oppressed side and some are born on the oppressor side. It's incumbent upon me to stop that behavior and lift up my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, right? That's where I'm born. And other people are born facing these huge hurdles and challenges that aren't fair. But it's a different set of challenges just like I've got. And so I think in a way we all have our own struggles, but we're all meant to overcome whatever struggle that is, and it looks different. And so that's kind of how I see privilege is just by where I was born in the society I currently live in.
Mm-hmm.
Because 1,000 years ago, my skin color wouldn't have mattered, my eye color wouldn't have mattered unless I was Nordic.
This is
Now
true.
it matters.
Now it
So,
matters.
and again, white privilege is another term that's burned. It's like reparations. Do you know what we should call reparations?
What?
The historic capital investments in primarily underserved communities that we can show a definitive return on investment. Because you start fixing streets and street lamps and you mow and you bring a neighborhood up, crime goes down, schools go up, education goes up, people go out. They come back to the community to be barbers, beauticians, doctors, dentists, lawyers, business owners. They come back because that's the community that built them. I have been in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where they're building a $32 million elementary school that's 20 years overdue. But across town, I'm hauling dirt to a $200 million upgrade on an all white high school in the big tax base. Upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
And this other new school is like modular buildings. It's cute, but it ain't that. And none of those sidewalks have a crack. Every one of their street lamps work, and you'll get a fine if that yard ain't mowed. But I'm hitting every pothole in the urban part where the minorities tend to congregate and live.
Right.
And I
Right.
started to see that for myself. And I'm driving a $150,000 dump truck between each place, right? Like the absurdity of this. And so, yeah, an historic capital investment. Because if you're getting white people like, oh, we can fix Black America, we can lower crime, and we can improve education in that community by throwing money at it, isn't that kind of all the same? It's just marketing.
It's just marketing. It's always marketing when it comes down to it. It's always marketing, but that's a great title. That's a great title instead of reparations. That's a
And you can't give
capital
people
investment.
cash. You can't put $1 billion in our economy by giving $10,000 out to
No.
each person. Inflation, I mean, it's just not economically feasible. But we can improve our economy as a whole by investing in primarily underserved areas. That we start filling in the gaps, right? The leaks in the dam. We start plugging them this way. And we start building a stronger foundation to draw from. Like, I wish employers, I'm going on a tangent now, I apologize.
Go ahead.
I wish employers would look at a resume and see somebody's from an HBCU, right? Miles College, Lane College, I don't Harris Stowe State, one they've never heard of, and go, oh, that's an historically Black college. What was your experience like? Da da da. What they don't realize is they have something very unique in front of them. Is that a potential job, that job seeker has access to a network of 101 schools and all the alumni from those schools and people and friends and family who went to those schools. Because somebody from Georgia and Florida, they don't see each other at a bar and go SEC, but let Morehouse and Howard run into each other somewhere. Your family. You might be cousins who argue, but your family.
Yes.
And they don't
Yes.
realize that that whole network comes with it. Like it's again, that's from perception to perspective.
We're going to talk about HBCUs because I'm a huge proponent of historically Black colleges and universities. But what do you say, George, to people who say racism no longer exists. In this podcast, I just want to put this disclaimer out here. This is not a white male or white female, white culture bashing podcast. This is a podcast where we are all trying to learn and understand different points of view and different lived experiences in hopes that it will empower all of us to come together and be more vulnerable and listen and learn from each other. So I just want to make sure that people understand we are not white bashing here at all. But to my question, George, I feel like people really started saying that racism doesn't exist. And I would even hear it on main media when President Barack Obama was elected, his first term. People started saying that racism doesn't exist. What do you say to that? Because even, and this is some Black history facts for you, highways are a result of racism because the highways were built to separate the affluent white communities from the Black and urban community. So when you see a highway or you're driving on a highway, just know that that's a product of racism. What do you say to people who say racism doesn't exist anymore?
I mean, in a literal sense, if I meet somebody, I may throw just a little tiny buffer, like racism doesn't exist. Could you explain that? And how they try to answer, if it's just dumb, then I'm talking to a fool. And my grandmother said, never argue with fools. And there's nothing to explain to that person. They're argumentative, right? They're looking for
Yes.
attention. So I'm not going to feed into that unless I'm trolling them, and then I have a fun with them.
Yes.
Um, but I I'm not sure I have met many people who can say that to me with a straight face. And so that, I think inherently most people know it does on some level. They
Hmm.
might not just want to agree or accept it. But there are the outliers who doesn't think. I mean, I have a really good friend who grew up in a very, very gated, we'll say gated community outside of Boston, right?
Okay.
It was a very culturally open school. Like, you would be amazed at the diversity of this uber wealthy little district. It is completely in a bubble. But because of that, this person had no idea of what racism was like in America. They're in their mid 30s. Like, they've learned more in the last year, just having seen and been to places, had no idea of this world. Her family didn't know this whole world.
Hmm.
So I realized I walked across America last year, and there's a big swath of the country that I met Black people who didn't know what an HBCU was.
Wow.
I met dozens. An HBCU, I go historically Black college university. Oh, yeah,
Wow.
it's not. I mean, so, and I met a whole lot of white people who didn't know, right?
Hmm.
But most of them sat up and listened. They were very interested. When I use Black history stories, I get white people. I have more white people buy me dinner walking across America because I would tell them stories at dinner. Like, come sit and join us. We want to hear about this. And then I would use that to say, your cell phone is a paperweight without HBCU grads, three of them
It's
specifically.
true.
It's
It's
literally
true.
a paperweight.
It's
People are
true.
like, our entire infrastructure and economy in this country was built in the mid 1800s on the backs of slaves because the cotton production. We borrowed money against our production to build our infrastructure and government, and we did it on the backs of human beings that we worked to death. Everybody benefited.
Everybody benefited
So
except
yeah, I
for
mean,
those slaves. Yes.
oh no, they learned skills according to a governor in Florida.
You know what? How could I have forgotten that he said that? He did say that slavery was good because they learned great skills like welding and farming. Yes. So
Well,
if you don't
here's
know who we're talking about, please go and look that up as well.
it's interesting. This is one of the things that helped me overcome my or understand my own racism and evolve.
Hmm.
I used to would argue that point, saying, well, they did. Look at Sarah Boone. She invented the ironing board, right? She worked in a house. She ironed all the time. Necessity is the mother of invention. These skills led them to create these new things, right? That's how I would have perceived it at the
Hmm.
time. That would have justified the argument, right? I mean, it's like saying somebody who's a survivor of a sexual assault is tougher because of it. We wouldn't dare say that, would we?
We would never say that.
So when you think of a young Black man that was buck breaking, right? He's better because of it. It's ignorance is rampant, and arguing with fools will get you nowhere. So I don't. I think for most people, until these problems land on their doorstep, they're not going to understand. And they're
Right.
quick.
Until it becomes personal.
Problems are coming to people's doorsteps quickly,
Hmm.
a lot more quickly than people realize.
Or that they want.
What they want is irrelevant here. We're on a trajectory right now that I'm not sure we've ever seen, and I don't know how it'll turn out. And I mean, the last 4 years were crazy too. I'm not gonna lie,
Hmm.
and I don't. I don't know. I try. I think I said this the other day, and I said it without thinking about it. And the more I think about it, I believe it's true. Is that white people's version of gang shootings are school shootings?
I've
They're
heard
just
that several
indiscriminate
times.
shootings,
Yes, I've definitely heard that.
and people don't want to admit it. I'm like, how are we any better? How do we have a high horse to sit on? You know, we talk about innocent kids being caught by a stray.
Hmm.
How about the ones that are executed for just being at school
Yes. Or at the movie theaters. Yeah.
or a homeless camp?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I've heard that several times. I've heard that. Okay, let's talk about your love and your passion for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Why do you think, George, that they are so important?
I think these schools are different because of the struggle.
Hmm.
These schools have gone through hell to exist and survive and thrive. Many of them, a lot of them have been lost. Some of them have been lost recently. Some are still going strong. These graduates have gone out and built companies, they built communities, and they built families in ways that I don't think we'll ever fully understand. These students help kick off the civil rights movement. And I think a lot of people in the white community don't realize how civil rights movement has benefited us immensely. Um, I I also realized it was a story nobody in my community ever told.
Hmm.
Maybe nobody cared for, right? They didn't know it existed. And so my beloved Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it was like 25% of that team in the 70s were from HBCUs. I've been
Wow.
working on a video for a while how HBCUs built the Pittsburgh Steelers because I think that's going to kind of be kind of a draw
I would
bombshell,
love to watch that.
Yeah, because I go through the list of players from John Stallworth to L.C. Greenwood to Mel Blunt, just down the list of all these guys. And Frenchie Fuqua, I did one on him. He saw my video. But Mike Tomlin's dad played at his biological father played at Hampton. He died when he was an infant, so his stepdad raised him. But his dad was a football star at Hampton. So the HBCUs are tied all into that. So, but more importantly, this was a huge community in America. I think it was a shining example of the best of Black America.
Hmm.
And it's never talked about, and we don't look at. I mean, very smart companies recruit from HBCUs.
They
I'm going to
do.
use Boeing and Eli Lilly. I saw them at A&T recruiting. Boeing tries to recruit all over the intelligence communities. They recruit from some HBCUs. Miles College has programs that are the three-letter alphabet agencies love. Like there's all these magical things. PLC in Detroit, Pencil Lewis College.
Hmm.
It's free. There's no room and board. There's no tuition. It's set up as master classes instead of 4-year degrees.
Hmm.
A legendary Nike shoe designer, E. Scott Morris, teaches shoe design there. He did Emmett Smith's ES22, all the Air Zoom Vics for Nike. He teaches. They have it's. I get to meet the CEO of Foot Locker there. Nike partners with. It's insane what that school has. And
Yes.
it's the coolest campus I've ever seen for an HBCU. And it's funded by Dan Gilbert, the billionaire that owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, the white guy.
Really?
Yeah, his Gilbert Foundation funds it all. Because the president, Dr. Dwayne Edwards, was a former shoe designer, head of shoe design at LA Gear at 23. So he and Dan Gilbert became friends, and I got to meet Dan. And yeah, he's like, okay, let's do this. So they bought the old UAW GM headquarters building, and it's this gleaming building. Sits right on the water, right across the water is Canada. So you walk out the back of the main building, and there's this beautiful courtyard. You walk right up to the edge of the water, and you're looking at Canada. All underground parking out of the weather. It's secure and safe. Like PLC in Detroit is an amazing school. That's just one HBCU, just one.
Yes.
There's 100 more to talk about.
Have you been to all of the HBCUs, or rather, how many have you been to?
42
You've been to 42.
in
Is
over
your
2 years.
goal to attend or to visit all
Hmm.
of them?
Absolutely. That's what I'm trying to do now.
Oh, I love this. You should do like a review of each one.
You haven't seen, I do a biography on almost everyone I go to. I
Really?
have I have
I've missed
dozens of them.
those.
I just did Johnson C. Smith the other day, and I'm about to
Mhm.
watch A&T's video today.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I love this. How can people who didn't attend HBCUs, whether African American, white, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, didn't attend HBCUs, how can they advocate and support HBCUs?
Give their applications a second look on jobs.
Okay.
That's one of the ways. And what I think once in a lot of people's life, they need to go check out an HBCU marching band. Just I
I
would
have
love to take. I
never
would love to take.
seen a marching band until you've seen an HBCU marching band, George.
I, I've been in their practice rooms with them before. I've been on the field while they practice. Like it's. I'll share this with you. Tennessee State played Notre Dame 2 years ago. First time ever they had an HBCU at Notre Dame, right? And Eddie George, Ohio State legend, Heisman Trophy winner, was the coach. And the coach of Notre Dame also played at Ohio State. So I think they got together to make the game happen. So before the game for the national anthem, they let the band director for Tennessee State lead Notre Dame's band for the national anthem. And then at halftime, they let Tennessee State's Aristocrat bands perform the closing set. For the first time in Notre Dame history, they let another band close halftime. And that stadium was packed. Nobody left their seats because they wanted to see this Grammy winning band. And nobody was disappointed because in the third quarter, it was a blowout game. So in the third quarter, everybody got up to go down. And we went down. People were talking like, and it was so cool. And Notre Dame staff, I mean, shout out to Notre Dame. That is the best college football stadium I've ever been to. And I've been to many of them. The
Mhm.
people, that was the best stadium and staff experience I've ever had. And they love Tennessee State. Like, that's America that I know and love.
Yes.
It was so. I mean, everybody stayed in that stadium because they knew they were witnessing something special. See what I mean? We became united, and it was ninety
Right.
percent white in that stadium.
Right. Right. Oh
That's
my.
something I wish they would support.
Yes. Yes. The band. I mean, the bands are amazing. I mean, if you cannot get there in person, which I've seen them in person, YouTube them. Look at them on YouTube. It is amazing. It's an amazing feat to see. In your view, how does education at HBCUs differ in terms of preserving truth and culture?
Something profound that stuck out with me. A friend of mine's son was accepted to 45 colleges with full rides, including all 8 Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Yale, all of them. He
Hmm.
chose a half scholarship at Morehouse. And his dream was Harvard. His Harvard Law School is still his dream now.
Okay.
But he said when he visited Morehouse, because his dad's a Morehouse man, he goes, as soon as I stepped on campus, I'm like, oh, I'm home. He goes, and I knew, he goes, in my high school, it was mainly white. He goes, I was the super smart black kid.
Hmm.
And here he goes, I'm just a black kid.
Oh,
He goes, I'm just a kid. I'm not a black kid here. I'm just a student, not the smart
hmm.
black student. And so he's a gifted young man. This man's going to go far. I love Jeremiah to death. But that stuck out to me, right? And then I met some students. They had a white kid, a student that attended. He was fetishizing the culture, and they felt it,
Okay.
and they basically ran him off because he wasn't here to learn. He wasn't here to fit in. He here because he fetishized us. I'm like, am I an issue being here? They're like, no, you're trying to learn and teach. This
Right.
kid, was exploiting us. So I understand the struggle of these schools and how they've had to teach their students a different reality than PWIs. And if you've never stepped foot in HBCU and you've never had conversations like I have, then there's no way people can understand what I'm talking about. You can, but people who look like me can't. They don't. That neural pathway in their brain hasn't been established. So
Right.
I see how so many of these schools prepare these kids for the world beyond just books.
Hmm.
travel, reading, well dressed, manners, like things just they instill how you greet people on campus. Don't walk on the grass. Simple traditions and boundaries that help us in life with self discipline. And they teach you how to work a network. Like it's a
Yes.
culture at the school. It's not a school, it's a culture with education. Dude, that's a great, I never thought about it that way. It really is. HBU's education with the culture.
What
Freeze
would
up.
you want white parents to teach their children about race and history as it pertains to African Americans?
What I would want, I have an ex girlfriend who was very smart, and she made her three kids go to the international, more inner city high school on purpose. It's a very good high school, legendary marching band, right? But you're in the minority if you're white there. And she made her kids go there so they would have friends who weren't white. I wish more parents paid attention to that because they didn't grow up feeling any particular way about anybody. If they disliked somebody, it was on a personal level. It wasn't because of their skin color.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I got to see they were young. I mean, of course, they have biases, but like teenagers. But as far as race, no, they didn't. They're good kids and they weren't raised to be that way. And so I think immersion exposure is a big part of it. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
kids live in white communities and white schools. I asked my friends this: when's the last time you had a black family into your home for dinner?
Wow.
That ain't often. That's we're nearing zero on the scale, right? I said, how many times have you taken a black couple out to dinner? Not just met up and talked to. You called
Mm-hmm.
on the phone and said, hey, Reggie, I want you to grab your girl. Can you meet us Friday night for dinner?
I
That number
wonder, as you're
starts.
asking that question, George, I wonder if the same question could be asked
Yes, yes.
yeah, you see where I'm going with this.
It applies both ways, but
Yes.
I'm white and I don't criticize black culture.
Yes,
If I'm going to offer
absolutely.
an opinion or criticism, it's on my culture because I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel I have any standing to do so. I'm not criticizing Hispanics, Asians. It's not my place,
Mm-hmm.
but I will call out my own.
Right. And we
But
should
yeah,
all do that. We should all call out our own and make them stand and be accountable for their actions and their words.
but that's
And
painful.
you have to be vulnerable, and you have to, and this is something that you have communicated throughout this podcast. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to put your ego aside. You have to put your pride aside. And I don't
But
know
that
how many people are willing to do that constantly. You know, they might do it once, but every day, I don't know about that.
you know, figuring out racism wasn't a light switch I flipped at all. It was
Hmm.
extremely years long, painful process. Not only just my faith I had to deal with, I had to accept that people that I loved and trusted taught me wrong, and I had to accept people they loved and trusted taught them wrong, and it just goes up the chain, right? So I had to forgive people for doing that because they didn't know necessarily what they were doing. They didn't understand. You'd think people would, but it's not that simple, right? So I had to come to terms with my character was flawed, and then I was an a-hole.
Hmm.
Like there's no getting around it. I can't rationalize or try to, well, I was a good guy, but no, I was an a-hole. And I'm okay with accepting the fact that I was, because it's not about where you've been, it's where you're going, right? So,
Right.
but because you have to accept you were wrong, you have to accept you're taught wrong. You have to accept your ideology is flawed and it's hurtful. Even to my own life, it's hurtful, not just to other people. The weight of the hate wears on you. So you're dealing with all these things. And now, when you start to step away from it, you're having to leave people behind because they're not down with you.
Right.
And the more passionate I become, the less interested they are. You know, I'm
Was
sure to
that
some people I'm
hard? I'm
radical.
assuming, like, as you're saying, I'm assuming that was hard
Yeah, I've
because
lost
you
people.
lose friends, you lose family.
I've lost people that I love very much. And it's I'm hurt, and that hurt sometimes wants to show up as anger, and I have to fight it, bite it back. I
Hmm.
want to say things that I know are hurtful because hurt people, and I want to and I don't, because in my heart I believe someday these people are going to be like, oh crap, I messed up, I was on the wrong side of things, I got to fix it. And then when they call, I want to be like, what's up?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I want to just be who I am purporting myself to be. But yeah, it hurts. And you think people would be proud of you, or happy. But I have a lot of people go, dude, I didn't know you were racist. I had a black guy that I went to high school with. I just sat
Mhm.
down in interviews. The first black guy I ever saw holding hands with a white girl. And it freaked me out, triggered me in a way I can't explain. And I got to have a conversation with him 40 years later about it. And he goes, bro, I didn't know you were racist. I go, yeah, I was a great closet racist.
Mhm.
Yeah. I knew I was racist. That wasn't a secret to me. I just didn't know how to do anything about it. There's no book. Nothing pops
There's
up on
no
Facebook.
book.
Stop being a
There's
racist
no
in 90
lesson
days.
plan. There is none.
And as much as I respect the work of, like, even if he's controversial, like Ibram X. Kendi, right, as an
Mhm.
anti-racist, he's put a lot of good knowledge out into the world, and he's put a lot of philosophical things to make you think. But it's still from the perspective of someone who's been oppressed by their skin color. And so that perspective is always going to be that he can jump that perception. So he's able to jump into other perspectives, right, to
Mhm.
speak. But until people who look like me start talking about it and being vulnerable about what our racism looks like in our own head, we're never going to be able to defeat the monster
Right.
because we don't talk about it. I'm willing to bet you've learned more about how the white mind works in racism today than you have cumulative.
I was waiting for you to finish speaking, George, and
Sorry.
that's
Sorry.
exactly no, that's exactly what I was going to say. You have really enlightened me and educated me on how the white culture and the white race thinks about African Americans and Black people, and how the government, it feels like the government is helping them and they feel slighted, so we need to do something about it.
And that
Like
exists
I've
on both sides.
never,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never heard it, but then again, I've never truly sat down, and this is as a Black woman, and you have been saying this whole podcast, that your shift started when you sat down with a Black man named Larry and started listening and asking questions. I've never done that. As a Black woman that has lived in America my entire life, you are the first white person that I have sat down with intentionally and asked these direct, difficult questions and actually listened to what you had to say. I've never done that. And I don't know how many people in my community has done that either.
That's why I'll answer anybody's questions about race. I don't need to see them up front. My views aren't going to change. I mean, they evolve. They're constantly evolving. I don't know how to get people to be more interested in conversation, but I will say this: you could take a hardcore white supremacist dude on the street and a black guy walk up and go, "Bro, those are killer boots. Where did you get those boots?" And that guy's gonna be, "Oh man, I got them at
Yeah.
so and so down there. Man, I love those. And you like them? Oh hell yeah, man, they're good. I'll tell you what, go talk to Chuck. He hooked me up." That's
Yes.
how that conversation is gonna go. He's not gonna
It
say
breaks
"f
down the
off" anymore.
walls. Yes.
No, 99% of the time, that's exactly the way I described it is the way it's gonna go down.
Yes.
Right? Or you walk up, "What's up, bro? Hey, what's up, man?" That's the way it's always gonna go down. You
Yes.
see what I'm saying? So on a
I
personal
do.
level, but I also didn't talk about, I dated a girl for 3 years right before I went to prison who had biracial children.
Hmm.
And so her youngest daughter I was really close to. I adored that girl. And my dad adored that young girl. Those two bonded like a 67-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl. It's just, they were two old souls. It was awesome to see. But um, I got to see firsthand what it was like to be a young biracial girl for 3 years and her getting ready and her hair. And she was going to the same schools I attended, right?
Hmm.
And great time making friends, but it was still a different experience, right? And I got to witness that. I got to be a part of it. And she had granddaughters, a couple of grandkids. So I got to see like young black 1 year old Lily, and I got to play with her, and I was Big G. And then I was carrying her in my arms around a real ritzy part of shopping area in Little Rock. And that
Hmm.
got back to my mom, goes, "I heard you were carrying that little N-word baby around."
What?
And so my mom and I had words, harsh words you shouldn't say to your mother.
Hmm.
I had that twice because of her comments. Yeah, which is, I know it's, but again, people can get offended by that, but that's part of something I've had to work through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't realize my dad was a big part of my racism, right? I loved my father. I had one of the best fathers a guy could ever hope to ask for. I love my dad. And at his funeral, we've had a lot of black guys work for us before we had a moving company. And they're like, your dad is the least racist white guy I ever met. What? What?
George.
He talked to me like a man. He treated me like a man.
And
You know what I
you
mean?
know
So
what?
I couldn't see his change. He changed
Right.
before my eyes, but I was so caught up in it, I couldn't see it. Only after he died could I begin to understand. He's sitting there talking to a 15-year-old biracial girl, the man who taught me you don't mix races.
Mm-hmm.
And he adored her, just adored her. And she adored him. Like, again, it's always immersion, it's exposure.
Right.
It's all it
Right.
ever is. And so that's why segregation was so bad. You know, if you let me go off on a tangent, education was illegal in the state of Virginia in the 1800s for Black Americans. In
Yeah.
Alabama in the 1830s, it was illegal to be Black in Alabama and free. So free Black Americans couldn't go there. It was illegal to exist. When you make education illegal and you intentionally keep a group of people uneducated, it's going to take them a while to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had no patience with that, none. And so we somehow now want to cast all these aspersions on a community, on a situation we created, right? We're trying to be the victim of the circumstances we created. There's no clear-cut solution. There's only compromises. But if we'll acknowledge that this is how we got to where we are, maybe we can start fixing it. But I don't think we want to fix it. There's too much money in not fixing it. There's too much political power in not fixing it. And,
George, please say that again for the people in the back. Racism, segregation,
it's
prejudice.
profitable.
It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and nobody wants to give it up.
And we're the
It is
product.
profitable.
We're the product.
Yes.
But
Yes.
again, people don't want to. I mean, I'm watching what's going on with Charlie Kirk, and I'm just seeing something. You know, I'm seeing some uh, crazy behavior, is all I'll say. And I've taken a step back, and I don't really. I've said my piece. There's really nothing else to say. Disagree with him. He didn't deserve to die. But I'm watching what's unfolding. People leaning in, people going at like it's craziness, right? It's profitable. It's a
It's
great way to control
profitable.
us. It's a great way to distract us because release the list. It's again, it's an amazing, powerful thing, and we
Yeah.
buy into it left and right.
Because we don't know any different. We don't see what's going on. And I'm in total agreement with you. It was horrible the way he died, and he had his children there. His children were front row, second row when that happened. And we're not gonna get into Charlie Kirk, but
Doesn't matter.
it
That's the
was
worst
horrible.
way. That is the I cannot think of a worse way for that man to die in front of his family, except being tortured to death. Right? I can't fathom the pain. And I
Right.
think, and whether people understand it or want to accept it, there is a chunk of America right now who is in pain. They
Yes.
feel physical pain over this. And I
Yes.
think we would be very wise to be mindful and respectful of that pain. Because I know, for instance, I'm going to use this as an example. Sometimes we don't want to be patient and extend that olive branch, right? Because we feel like they didn't do it to us. That's a
Mhm.
natural. But I wish people in this case would just be a bigger person, be a little more humane. These, I'm seeing behavior that doesn't make sense to me, right? I'm seeing this idolatry that doesn't make sense to me, which is letting me to believe people are in greater pain than I realize. And it's not, I think, just him. I think it's this thing out there that people are clinging to, and he's become representative of it. And whatever that is painful. And we're
Mhm.
seeing the manifestations of it. And so I don't carry that pain. I don't share it, so I don't understand it, but I accept that it's real to them. And if we're not careful, things could go so much further south.
Okay, so we're getting ready to wrap up, George, and I have
Sorry.
a few more. No, 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 no. I have a few more questions. This has
Sure.
been such an enlightening, and I'm just speaking for me, an enlightening podcast for me. What role, and you spoke about this earlier, how your racism and your Christianity never intersected and never came together. What role do you think churches play in dismantling white privilege? I remember a famous quote by Malcolm X, who said that Sundays are the most segregated days of the week. And that he said that so many years ago, but it's still true to this day, because white America goes to their white churches, black America goes to their black churches, Chinese, they go to their Chinese churches. It is so segregated. And ministers, deacons, leaders of the church, whatever you want to call them, race and Christianity is not intersecting.
To be fair, I like to eat lunch at noon. So that excludes a lot of churches for me. I get low blood sugar and I can't bring a chicken sandwich into church.
Correct,
And
Jordan.
I also don't own a TV. So I do not own a TV. Haven't in 10 years. Don't know what's going on. So it's very hard for me to sit still for a movie, much less a sermon.
Okay.
Second, and this is apropos of no church in particular, just in general, I begin to
Hmm.
see a lot of organized religion as a cult.
Okay.
It's a business. And so I see things get politicized, etc., and I see the word of God being perverted for different goals. And the more I got into storytelling, as I went to church, I started being more critical of some of the pastors I saw,
Hmm.
because I'm realizing how performative they are before, instead of organic and sincere. And I've only ever been to white churches. Let's just be clear. I've never fully attended and I'm going to. I absolutely want to attend a true Black Baptist church, right? I need that experience in my life, and I need the love of God in my life like that. But I've only ever really attended white pastors, so that's what my perception is. And I've like, my church never taught me what was wrong with racism and Christianity and my faith, right? And Christianity is being slandered to a point that I don't really use the word Christian anymore. And if somebody asks me if I believe in God, I say, no, I know God. I got that from Carl Jung. I don't believe in him anymore. I know God. I have a relationship with him, right? There's no more
Hmm.
believing. I know him. So we've gotten so far away from that message in some ways. And it's about the amount of money that can bring in. And so I just, I think culturally, white people church and black churches are very different in the way they go down.
Hmm.
I wish we would see the mixing, but I don't really know how, because so much of them are based on each respective culture. It's not inclusive of other cultures, right? Our Jesus is going to look different to you. If
Hmm.
you come to my church, Jesus looks nothing like you. If I go to your church, Jesus looks nothing like me. And
Hmm.
I don't have a problem with that, because we're all made in the image of Christ, right? If I have a feeling, if you and I saw Christ standing there, his skin color is going to look like yours to you, and it's going to look like him to me. And
Hmm.
we're looking at the same man, because we're all part of Christ, right? Think
Right.
about that. So again, I just think we've separated by culture, and I don't know how you. I know that was a long answer. I apologize, but I have issues growing up in church, and now how I feel about organized religion.
Okay. No apologies needed. We are having a conversation here. In conversation, you take pivots and you go on tangents, and it's absolutely fine. How do you see your role in bridging conversations between Black and white communities?
I think I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Hmm.
You see how I look, right?
Yes.
I could go to a MAGA rally and fit right in, and nobody would question a thing.
True.
I go into the AKAs crossing over at Hampton, and I'm like the only white face in the room, and there's 1,000 people in there, and I'm accepted.
Yes.
So I think I can speak in rooms that you can't. Fair enough.
Yes.
And I can speak in rooms that a whole lot of white America cannot. I can
Yes.
get an audience with certain people most white people cannot.
Yes.
Do you know who Benjamin Crump is, the attorney?
Yes.
He put my video on his page. And I was really honored, because Mr. Crump does not put white people on his page.
Wow.
So,
What
and
video was it?
I guess one of my history videos. And then
Okay.
Beyonce's mom, Tina Knowles, she put my video on her page, which was really cool.
Yes.
Um, so I think in a way, I'm able, I think my gift is I can articulate and verbalize things well, my thoughts and how I see things. Being able to move in both rooms kind of creates a bridge. Like I can explain a white rationale and mindset to you, and I've got
Mhm.
so many relationships and friends who are black that I understand how their perspective, right? And I can translate that to my white friends. And so and when I do that, like I have a friend who I adore. I've known him for a quarter century. He's only dates black women, right? It's all he's ever been attracted to. He's a great guy. And I've
Is he
tried to get
white?
him. Yeah, he's white. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good look. I mean, successful, just he loves black women. Always
Mhm.
has. He's a good dude. And I said, come to an event with me. And he's afraid of being judged. He's afraid of how he'll be treated. I'm like, bro, if you're with me, you're good. You're golden, right? Because if I'm bringing you, then you must be okay. And you'll be,
Mhm.
and he feels like he needs to say, I only date black women. My girlfriend's black. And because he adores his
Oh.
girlfriend. And he still feels that. I'm like, they're all his ex-wives, family, ex-girlfriends, families, they love him. He still has relationships with his ex's families. He was that cool white guy. But he in his mind, for some reason, can't put it together that he's accepted. He fits in. This is a 55-year-old man. And
Mm.
it baffles me. Like, bro, your kid's mixed. Like, how families love you. There's a disconnect. I've asked so many of my friends back home to come to these events, and they've all found excuses not to. Like, what would I do there? I'm like, have fun.
Right. Enjoy,
Nobody
meet,
cares what
talk.
color you are. Yeah. I'm meeting TV stars, famous DJs, NFL players. Like, who doesn't want to come get to do this stuff?
That is true.
But
That is
again, so yeah, it's hard. I've only had a few people, white friends, that I've been able to take to HBCU and had a blast. Every single one of them had a blast.
wow. But
So
you have also taken many via your videos as well. Maybe not in person, but you are making a huge impact via your videos and your social media. I will absolutely attest to that. My final question for you, George, if someone who's listening to this podcast right now only takes away one lesson from your story and one lesson from you, what would you want that lesson to be?
I think it's two part. For one, melanin only goes about 3 layers deep into our epidermis and dermis, right? And no two people in this world have the same level of melanin. Melanin is like fingerprints. Even identical twins don't have the exact same shade. So we're all melanated, right?
Mhm.
And so we like to use that as a way to kind of separate whatever. We're all the same. We're literally all the same. And second, we're all redeemable. I don't care how big of an a-hole you were, you have the potential not to be. I just take it to the extreme and speak out about it because I'm passionate. I have no kids. I have no family. I have no address. You can't
Mhm.
cancel me. You can't take anything away from me that hasn't already been taken. So I realize that puts me in a unique place to speak.
Right.
So, and but that's for me, that's not for everybody. I support black owned businesses because I want to show people what it's like. It's not because I'm obsessed with it. It's just I feel like if I have a voice, I want to lead by example.
Mhm.
Not everybody should go out and only use black owned businesses, but I want to show you how great it is, the experiences, so people get over some perceived intimidation of it. That's all, that's all it is. It's why I tell these stories and I talk about race is to normalize it's okay to be vulnerable about it. So again, we are redeemable. We do change, we do evolve. And I know there are black people that I've met who don't like me because of the color of my skin and the look of my face.
Mhm.
And they're adamant about it. But I've also had them say, hey, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about white people.
Which goes to your point. We can evolve, we can change, we can renew the way we think.
And I've had probably, it's got to be approaching 100 now different white men conversations I've had about racism and their own racism privately.
Mhm.
I've had, God knows, I remember when it was like 60 something, and I've had dozens more since then. They want to talk privately about it.
At least they're talking.
They're
I
aware
mean,
of
it
it.
does not have to be public. At least they're wanting to have the conversation and ask the questions and listen to the answers.
Do you know their biggest obstacle? Their
What?
spouse spouse and or their friends or coworkers are all racist. And to give it up means they'll be ostracized.
Oh, wow.
Conversations change, energy change, relationships change. When you look at your wife and say, "Stop saying the N-word around me,"
That's
that
going to be a
marriage, that
problem.
marriage just hit a crossroads.
That's going to be a problem.
Do you see how people would think of, well, I don't want to give up my potential partner? That's a possibility, right? It's
Yes.
just easier to keep being racist. Go along to get along. So there's, like I said, there's amount of peer pressure. I'm not justifying or rationalizing
Mhm.
racism. It is just more complex than people understand.
Well, George, White George, George Sedberry, you have a lot of monikers. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and educating me, enlightening me and my audience, and allowing us to glean from your lived experiences. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. To my community, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get George's podcast on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.